Good afternoon, everybody. How are y'all doing? Hope you are having a great week. Thank you for joining us here on Midnight Hatter Live, the weekly variety show where we talk Gundam, gaming, and Gunpla. I am, of course, Steven, aka Midnight Hatter, your host, and joining me, as always, is Adam Blue from Gundam Explained. How are you doing, good sir?
Hey, doing good. Yeah, it's been a week. I don't even know what to say actually. It's just we're
It's
here. I'm glad we do this, and yeah, there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I think this has been an interesting week. It's one of the weeks that has ever existed, right? So we can I have some exciting stuff to share with you guys, and probably going to have some interesting conversations as a result of that. So
Yeah.
yeah, let's go ahead and get into it because basically, I don't want to waste too much time on all the preamble, but I do want to point out that Adam, you dropped a video this morning on the Robot Spirits Mark II. Love that thing. It is such and it's so funny because oh hey, cheers. Thank you for the subscription there. It's so funny because you and I both whipped out our Mark IIs last week
Yeah,
where
it's a great
wow, would you
suit.
say it that way?
Yeah.
But yeah, today's episode is going to be very Gundam Mark II heavy, I think, because there's some backstory going on here. There's some of the usual players involved and some good arguments to be had. So by the end of the stream, we're probably going to be talking about our favorite Gundams, which it should be a short conversation because we all know
Yeah.
which
Right.
are our favorites. But yeah, so most of the week I have spent working on a little custom. Thank you guys so much because the last build that I did was so well received, both on YouTube and Instagram that it has inspired me to do an entire series on upcycling things from around the house and doing Gunpla stuff with them. And so as a result of that, I do have a suggestion. If you are just getting into customizing Gunpla and you want to do panel line scribing or installing LEDs or any kind of intense customization, I cannot recommend enough that you start with the high grade 2-pack of the ball because
You can say
A,
balls.
you get 2 of them,
It's okay.
like, so if you screw up, you've always got a backup. But then you also, there's not a ton of moving parts and it's like basically a hollow shell so you can stuff anything you want in there and it's just easy to work with. So spoiler alert for my next video.
Oh,
It's gonna involve some balls,
yeah, I like balls. They're a cool unit. They have a lot of features. It shoots things.
and they come in pairs.
Yeah, come in pairs. I like where this joke is going, but don't
we
make
could
it wrong.
probably stretch it
Yeah.
out the full hour of just nothing but ball jokes. But as a result of doing all this work, I've been listening to a lot of YouTube videos, and I've discovered some very interesting things that I want to share with you guys. First of all, this one will probably be the shortest thing to talk about. And I feel bad because, poor Adam, his DMs just get blown up every day when I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting. I'm gonna send that to Adam. Hey, I'm gonna send that to Adam." So
Well, no, don't worry. Everyone in the world is blocked but you. I actually have a computer set up for any notification from you goes straight to it.
well, that's I appreciate the dedicated server. Um, no, and honestly, what Adam and I send mostly just shit posts to each other. So
Yeah.
but, so one of these videos that I sent to Adam was an interesting one about real life AI, which, we've kind of had discussions about large language models and like, algorithms and things like that. But this one was an interesting one because this guy seemed convinced. He was basically, oh, and by the way, links to all of these things in the description below so you can check them out. He was
Cool.
discussing a study that came out that seems to suggest that everything that we think about generative AI or everything that we would assume to be the case is not only wrong, but it's inverse of what we would expect. So to sum it up, if you think about it in terms of like generative AI, in particular talking about things like image generation, how effective it is at recreating the idea that you're trying to communicate via the prompt, you would assume that the more source images, the more information you provided to the AI, that it would get better and better. So, like, if this is the graph and it's like,
Yeah.
this is the information we've given the AI, and this is how good it is at generating images similar to that information. You would think it just goes up and to the left, right? You feed it more images, and it's gonna get better and better at generating images. But what this paper seems to suggest is that there is a diminishing return, and the arc is actually more of a parabolic arc where we've plateaued at the capabilities of generative AI. Now, not in the sense that they're not going to get better, but if let's think of like a tangible example. So, like a picture of a cat. In order to get a photorealistic image of a cat, the AI has to be fed so many images of cats and like photographs of cats
Yeah.
that you would have to provide billions of sources of information in order to get it to do what you wanted it to do, which is provide a photorealistic image of a cat. And so at that point, you have diminishing returns in the sense that you would have to spend hundreds of years taking pictures of cats in order to teach the AI how to generate a picture of a cat. And so it's like at that point, you might as well just take a picture of a cat. You know what I'm saying?
Dude, that's a good point, and I think I've read about that with early AI in terms of when they're talking about the term AI, how if you really wanted a human AI, I don't think that's possible. It's going to require billions of neurons at work. How do we replicate that as a human? You know,
Yeah,
we can only program an AI as far as our capabilities are,
right.
and so that completely makes sense. That there's going to be diminishing returns if you're really trying to get to that level. Would you say that this could somehow, be related with video games in generative AI? Or does that have, like, an obvious ceiling?
I think that, even in my own experience, I've
Yeah.
found limitations of generative AI as far as video game development goes. One of the things that I would, posit is that, uh, Hideo Kojima got it right in Metal Gear Solid 2, is that there's so much junk data and so much incorrect information
Oh.
that is being sourced. Sometimes I'll use, like, a Chat GPT as, like, basically rubber duck debugging for my own video game programming, for scripting things at work, and what I have found is that it has been fed so many incorrect answers that sometimes it will not give me the correct answer even when I'm telling it to. So,
Hmm.
again, a tangible example, I was writing a script for, like, a product recommendation, for my company's website, and using the large language model, I was asking it, "Here are the parameters that I'm trying to do," but, like, for some reason, the filters aren't working. And no matter how many times I told it to use filters, nested if statements, it kept trying to sandwich them all into one, but Shopify's Liquid doesn't allow you to do that. So, and I was like, "That doesn't work. Try it again. This time use nested statements." And it was like, "Oh, apologies," like, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, so clearly there in the Shopify documentation or somewhere on Stack Overflow, whatever the incorrect information is that this large language model was sourcing from, it, it's convinced that that's the right answer when I know it's not, and Shopify is not letting me do it.
That's interesting, because it makes me think of, like, like in Game of Thrones, there was that one episode where they accidentally had a Starbucks cup in the back, and
Yeah,
technically, if you were gonna say, "Here's a picture of this world," that would be incorrect information. Now think of that's how
right.
things kind of accidentally get snuck into a data point, and then you're over a period of time, a large amount of time, that one small incorrect thing becomes a bigger and part of the whole. I think that's kind of what you're speaking on too, because then when the AI is then needing to source from everything, there's just been so much of that small wrong junk data that yeah, it's part of the prompt process.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so and unfortunately, well, maybe this is fortunate, I guess it depends on your perspective, but, like,
Yeah.
generative AI doesn't have any kind of impulse or initiative. It doesn't think to go out and try to correct things. It just you feed
Which
it
is
a prompt and it gives you what you want.
yeah.
So, there's always going to have to be, like, a human fact checker or a human, handler, I guess,
Yeah,
to
I was just talking at work too because we're doing so much AI stuff. It's mainly the Microsoft Copilot, but there was this thing where you can really use it to help you draft an email that has a lot of different data points, and you don't really know what's the best way to kind of format it so that everyone can make sense of it. It's not like you're speaking to one individual and you know their language and know how to speak to them. It's like, okay, there's this broader group. I have to explain all these different moving pieces. I can just feed it into the Copilot AI and then it spits out, and then I'll read it, be like, yep, this is what I need, and make little tweaks, as needed, um, and
Yeah.
send it out. So,
So it's I mean, it's always gonna be now that kind of, Pandora's box has been opened on these types of generative models, there are always gonna be tools that, and you see it all over the place, like, everyone's got some kind of AI plugin that they're promoting, but it's just interesting to me that, like, we might have just peaked, like, that's
yeah,
it.
and I think that's true. And if we look at right now where any company is saying where they've made progress, for instance, EA, Electronic Arts, was talking about how, making a stadium in FIFA, which would normally take, I forgot what they said, maybe a year, 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 days, because the AI can continue to improve on that. And then with, I think, was it GPT-4? They just showed off the kind of the teaching that it can do, the education and the teaching, which is a an awesome goal or result to have with a technology like that, to be able to help others. So seeing EA use it in the way they did, and this other company, it's not like they're making up some crazy stuff to, like, then all of a sudden make a bunch of money. No, it's there's these little things to help the human
Yeah.
move forward. It's
At least
interesting.
until it realizes that it's being used and manipulated and it turns on us and
Yep. Which, hey, isn't that the plot of the X-Men with the Sentinels?
I
All
mean,
that
with the
stuff?
Sentinels, it's Terminator, it's
Terminator. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we've written enough horror stories about AI that,
Did you see the movie Virus with Jamie Lee Curtis in the
no, I
90s?
haven't.
Totally under the radar, but awesome CGI fest movie where it's this alien electromagnetic signal. I forget the actual details. Gets to Earth's electronics and starts forming like aliens out of it. But
Oh, man.
they're saying because the humans are a virus on the Earth and they need to be exterminated.
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was a cool movie, but I remember people didn't really care too much about it.
Yeah,
Um,
you know.
yeah.
But, on the subject of, I would say, more fun AI, we were
Yeah.
just talking about, like, using it for video games and stuff, and so as part of the research that I've been doing, we worked on it a couple of weeks ago. Adam and I are kind of building out a little game demo that hopefully you guys are gonna be able to play here soon. I've been doing a lot of research on video game AI, and I've got, again, a couple of links down in the description, stumbled upon some very interesting videos about how AI can be used to shape the gameplay, not in the sense of like, "Oh, here are my enemies, and, like, I'm just gonna go shoot the enemies," and, like, "Oh, they're smart enough to use these types of objects, but not those ones." So, the example and, again, this guy's video, I forget his name, I wanna say it's Kyle, but he has a video about a shooter that he's making, um, and he touches on some of the AI used in Uncharted, which I'd watched, like, a GDC talk about the AI in Uncharted
Oh,
3
yeah.
or
I
4, I
think you told
think,
me about that, yeah.
and it's very interesting the way that the AI is designed in the Uncharted games. It's smart, but it's also kinda dumb because, it's like they can hang on ledges, but they can't shoot from a ledged position even though Nathan Drake can,
Yeah.
so it automatically gives the player a slight advantage. But what he pointed out is that the AI in the Uncharted games, actually their accuracy, the stat that controls how quick how accurate their shots are on the player, actually increases on a curve based on how long the player is out of a cover position. So the more you're running around, if you're trying to run and gun as Nathan Drake, they're going to hit you more and more often until you die. And so then that teaches you, okay, the way that the game developers want you to play the game is you have to take cover and then their accuracy will decrease on a curve. And of course, the irony is the longer you stay in a cover position, the more often you're going to get hit with like grenades or, a guy's going to come around the corner with a shotgun in order to drive you out of that cover position. So it creates this gameplay loop of like, I know I have to get to cover in this, like, gunfight arena, but I can't stay in cover too long.
You know what? And I feel like I appreciate that kind of thinking when it comes to third person shooting games, especially, earlier ones. But I almost feel like and this could be just an opinion, obviously. But like I feel like the best end result is to have that single system just play off of another system instead of having to adapt to the player's style. If like I would think the guys would be worse at shooting if you're running outside of cover.
Well,
But
I'm glad
it
that you mentioned that
okay, go
because
on.
there is a game that does the inverse of
Okay.
this, and it's Doom. When a player is in cover or, like, trying to hide from shots in Doom, the enemies actually get more aggressive and more accurate in order to
Oh,
drive you out of cover because that's the way that the developers want you to play Doom, is to run and gun, to get in close, and so the more you're moving, which, like you said, that's more intuitive, is the more you're moving, the
yeah.
less accurate they would be. They actually physically are less accurate as you are moving in Doom, which is just and it's just because they're trying to nurture 2 different play styles in these 2
Yes.
different games, which is so fascinating to me.
That is neat, and I feel like there's almost 2 options to this in game design where it's like, "Okay, let's cater to player styles, or let's teach the player to cater to our mechanics."
Yeah.
I feel like those things have to be decided early on because you could create systems where you're not realizing you're having them overlap, and then sometimes something might not make sense, like an enemy not seeing you or turning around. The little things that because these different mechanics act differently. Now there's just weird actions occurring, which I think it comes with scripted situations. Sometimes when you have these scripted situations, you kind of don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, so I think especially with modern game design, and you can kind of correct this idea I have. It's like you might want to decide what direction you want to go, but if you're combining them, it could be fun. Or it
Yeah.
might end result into something you wouldn't expect. So I don't know.
And that's something that I'm trying to work on is a more dynamic AI system because and again, he touches on this in the video. His AI that he's building is very similar to both Uncharted and Doom in the sense that in Uncharted, like I said at this GDC talk, they were talking about how they create like an arena. And in this arena, the AI cannot leave. So if there's a dedicated space to fight, there's basically a boundary box that's like these AI are not going to leave this, whether it's like a temple or excuse me, whether it's like a temple or an outdoor area, they can't leave that space. But when they also have prioritized zones for individual enemies to go to. And so it's like you'll have a couple of different zones of varying sizes where it's like these types of enemies will only pool in this zone. And if there's a certain number of enemies in this zone, then any extra enemies that are spawned are going to go to a different zone in order to create that like dynamic or a sense of dynamic, intelligence among the
Yeah.
AI. And then you have like sniper positions where it's like a teeny tiny zone that is only the size of one person. And it's like that sniper is going to go there and he's not going to move because that's his only designated zone. Um, and so similarly, that's what this guy is doing in his game where he's got these zones where the individual AIs will go to and shoot at the player from. Now he is trying to go for that Doom style combat where you have to move around and stuff, so he spaces them out, like, almost perfectly evenly apart in order to create, like, a run and gun, like, you have to, like, run to individual ones to
Oh
shoot
yeah.
them, and then what he does is he does this very brilliant, attack cooldown timer where the AI, because you don't want all the AIs attacking at once, right? Because that would be A, it's kind of unfair to the player, and B, it actually creates these gaps because like if all of them shoot at once, then there's a period of time when no one's shooting, and it's like, well, I'm just gonna pick
Yeah.
off all of them. So he created this cooldown timer where it's interesting because each uh each enemy AI has like a weighted score of like, is this the best opportunity for me to attack the player? And so if they're closer, generally they're going to have a higher score because it's like, well, I'm closer to the player, he's not attacking, So my score is the highest, I'm gonna shoot. And, after the shot, he resets. But what does that mean for the guys in the back or for that sniper character that would be like up in the zone by himself? They would never shoot because their priority is never going to be higher than the guys up front. So the longer they don't shoot, their score increases. It's like, okay, I haven't shot for 3 seconds, haven't shot for 5 seconds, but then when he hits like 7 seconds, all of a sudden he has the highest priority just because it's taken him longer to shoot. And so then you get that shot from the far away guy. So it's really brilliant how he did this where it's like, you kind of have these staggered Sammy says hi everybody. um you kind of have these staggered shots and it's really realistic, but dynamic too.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I feel like if you're playing it enough, you might be the type to, like, start to guess when, "Okay, this enemy's probably gonna shoot me soon," because he hasn't, interacted with me. That also reminds me of, like, in Call of Duty, and I forget when they started this and when it went away, but the whole thing was, like, ducking behind cover, but you had to keep moving up incrementally, and then at some point, the enemy would then stop respawning. That
Yeah.
way, it's like the game was telling you, "Yeah, there's a lot of enemies, but try to pick them out and move forward." Like, the game wouldn't advance unless you moved forward.
I
But
think I
yeah,
think Uncharted does something similar to that too,
it
because you
it
can
it
because you
must.
can advance through a place without combat at all sometimes.
Yeah, and you know what? I think this just comes from it's like in my mind, I'm like critiquing this, but I'm then realizing we came from a time where it was harder to create these dynamic systems. Things were pretty much
Oh, yeah.
static. If you were going to do this, it was scripted to do this. So then you had to build a system scripted to do something and then have them interact. But it's like nowadays, I would hate to have these kind of like imposed timed restrictions on AI and see how we can make it just dynamically and organically interact with the world. And obviously you play with it to test for when the AI does game breaking stuff
Right.
and then tweak from there. But I think that would be the good end result to have something so dynamic you don't have to do any scripting. Yeah.
Yeah, because if you can create an algorithm that is robust enough to account for, the myriad of, variables that you would have to, you know, y maybe instead of having these designated zones, then you would basically just create, like.
A stamina meter, like some unseen stamina style gauge.
Yeah,
Or
and you
that
could.
they have limited ammo, so they have to go back and restock.
Yeah, things like that I think
Yeah.
would be, so that's part of, I think, what is the AI model called, goal-oriented action planning.
Hmm,
So a lot of people, when you talk about there's like 4 different types of, AI implementation you can do. You can do like a state machine where it's like, oh, they're patrolling or they're alert or they're shooting. Like, you have these defined states, you have triggers to go into the state, and then you have an action associated with that state. You also have like behavior trees, which are easy to visualize because you can say, like, okay, if they are doing this, then they have these options that they can branch off from. What's interesting about goal oriented action planning is that it kind of scraps that idea of being in a state where you give the AI goals that they have to do. It's like, okay, your
mhm.
goals are kill the player, make sure that your hunger meter is not zero, and yeah, like something else, right? And then you have actions that are like the behaviors where it's like, okay, well, attacking the player advances the kill the player goal. But if you're too hungry, then the priority of attacking the player goes down, and the priority of like eat, which reduces the hunger meter, you know,
That's a great idea.
increases.
Like,
So
yeah, priority the thing I like to call because I learned it from work is conditional we call conditional access, but it's like
there you
before you
go.
log into a system, it has to check all these things, and some are priority over another. And there's like logic trees with that. And yeah, it's kind of helped me think about AI when you're like explaining the things you've created with you'll show me something, and then that's kind of helped me uh, think about it.
See, video games are an educational tool, and
They
that's
are 100%.
tell your parents that.
100%.
Um, so yeah, I think that using a goal-oriented action plan would help. Like you said, if there's an ammo box that's like, okay, well, I can't advance to the kill player goal until I've restocked my ammo. So
Yeah.
that action then becomes a higher priority. And so then if you do that, and you have, like, self-preservation instincts that are built into the goals as well, then you don't have to, like, designate these zones and designate these timers and things like that. You basically have, like, a series of goals for the each AI to meet, and then different actions with different weights so that, like, you don't again, you don't have to, like, script all of these different things
Yeah.
individually. You just let them go and let them do their own thing.
Yeah, this is good stuff. This is getting to that emerging gameplay that's real big right now.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And actually, not related to AI, but related to emergent gameplay, I just watched a GDC talk about Tears of the Kingdom that you would like,
Oh,
because they talk about the physics system and how they broke the game while they were trying to get it to work. So the problem is they had 2 different systems playing off of each other. They used the Havoc physics engine for all of, like, the physics-based interactions. But then they also used non-physics objects, and they, like, just kinematically moved them. So, that, it's like scripted actions. "Oh, we're gonna move move this platform over here." And that works for older styles of games where, the player world interaction is not as prioritized. But, one of the things about Tears of the Kingdom and, like, these other types of games that you've mentioned, Roblox, Minecraft, all these, games where players are encouraged to kind of create their own fun, they really need to be able to interact with all of the physics. So, like, one of the examples that they brought up is one of the puzzles in one of, like, the, Tears of the Kingdom, like, shrines. So they had the ice block, right? The ice block is a physics object, and anything that bumps into the ice block stops. But they had one of those, like, sliding gates that was the pathway to beat the shrine. The gate was controlled by inverse kinematics. And so what would happen is if you put the block there, the gate would just smash through it because it doesn't recognize it as a physics object. So they had to rethink everything, and they were like, okay, there can be no kinematic motions in the game. Everything has to be physics driven. And the reason that they did that is so that you can have those types of puzzles. Now, here's the thing, is the solution to that puzzle was actually to put the ice block on the button that you have to stand on to open the gate. But because they created everything as physics objects, now all of a sudden you have an alternative solution to the puzzle, which is to you stand on the gate and then put the block underneath it and let the gate get stuck on the block. And so,
oh.
the things that we really enjoy about, like, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are the result of that kind of iterative design where it's like, "Oh, well, if this is the type of gameplay that we're trying to nurture, we can't use these systems because they don't interact with each other. Everything has to be charged by the physics engine."
That reminds me of something from a childhood memory when I would get on the old Paint program on Windows 95, and then I would just, like, draw random circles and then get the paint fill tool and then fill until I've created something that looks like something, It's because I don't know what I'm doing. I know I have these tools, and that's kind of what I think makes those Zelda games charming is they had these,
Yeah,
like, basic tools, and then as they were developing things, it's like, well, we can make it do this then, and then that. And I think that's helps make a good game because it's almost like it's like someone playing a game. You play a game and you're sometimes like, oh, I wish I could do this or that. Um,
yeah.
it's a good way to go about design. It really is.
I mean, I think so, for
Yeah.
sure. I think that that's where a lot of, wall jumping came from because I've noticed this in, like, one of the
Oh,
platformers I was working on. Is, like, the physics material that I was using for the player and for the wall, they're both high friction physics materials, and so what happens is when the player jumps and hits a wall, they basically get stuck there if you're holding that direction because it's like, "Oh, these are 2 physics objects rubbing together, they should be stuck together," and then it doesn't let like, until you let go of the directional pad that he doesn't
yeah.
fall. So, like, imagine if that was, you programming this and you're like, "Whoa, that's actually kind of a neat gameplay thing." Like, what if
Yeah.
we were to institute some kind of, like, wall jumping mechanic or wall running mechanic? It's like, that's
That's
where that kind of
funny
stuff comes from.
because even with all the examples you show me when you're doing development work, I can totally see where I would feel like daily. developers could accidentally come across something that they might just end up ditching, but then could be used for something. I wonder, and that would be a great thing to look up, or if there's pieces on this, like what are some games out there that during development things were found out or realized that changed the rest of the game?
I'm sure there's a list out there of, uh, things like that. Game Maker's Toolkit probably has a video all based on
Yeah.
just that, like, iterative design and the impact of happy accidents.
Yeah. Yeah. Happy accidents. Yeah.
Well, I guess Fall Guys, that was one that we talked about,
Oh,
a couple
yeah.
weeks ago where it's like, I don't know what game they set out to make, but I guess playing around in the physics engine.
Yeah. Made something fun. Yeah. That's really awesome.
So, yeah, interesting stuff. Like I said, I know that not everybody in the, crowd is a video game designer, but, hopefully you kind of find these talks, interesting and will like I said, I hope that it kind of colors your perception of the next time you're playing a game, you know, is the game developer trying to enforce a certain play style using different tools at their disposal? Because it's funny to me when people say like, "Oh, I prefer like open world games where you can do whatever you want and it's non-linear and all this stuff." And it's like, I think even your open world game is probably more linear than you might imagine.
Yeah, I think I've come and vice versa can happen too. I know in
Yeah.
like Castlevania recently, there's this item that I found out you can get early on if you don't have double jump, but if you happen to have and picked up this, I think it's like a bat attack where you transform into a bat for a second and then fly out forward. Well, by using if you happen to get that attack due to RNG at the beginning, you can use that to get to this item early because it bypasses the double jump. And I'm like, that's neat because I bet they tested for that and saw that that could be a possibility, but we're like, the odds that players are gonna figure this out, they'll figure it out later for speed runs, but early
Y-
on, not, you know.
Yeah, God bless the speedrunning community because they probably stumble upon more of this stuff than anybody else.
And in turn, that probably helps people that wanna get into game development because it kinda gives them insight and ideas into the structures, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some of the, I guess most popular and fun games to break, it's like you kind of get into the developer's head a little bit when you notice these glitches and you notice these kind of optimization techniques that they used in order to make the game work. But then, like, when you see speedrunners break those things, it's like, "Oh, so in order to save resources, they spawn all of these things, here, and that gives you a way to access them early and all this stuff." So it's like it's just neat stuff to me.
Yeah. No, all that stuff is neat. Yeah.
But for the thing that you guys all came for, because I'm sure that, this was, this was chief attractant to this particular stream. Top 5 Gundams. Now, I'm gonna put you on the spot here in just a minute,
Ready.
Adam, but a little backstory on this. Like I said, I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos, listening to streams and things like that, and one of them was this particularly offensive stream yesterday from our good friend Unusualist Pyro, in which he was building his, high grade Zeta, and he had the gall to say that the Zeta Gundam's design isn't that good, that it doesn't even break top 10.
That Zeta Gundam?
The Zeta Gundam.
Hmm.
So I immediately unsubbed and,
Well, of course. Although,
as one does. What's that?
to play devil's advocate, I'd say he's correct if you look at Gundam in the more grounded sense from, like, the first show,
Yeah, okay.
but
I see where you're coming from. That actually ties into a tweet that I saw last week as well from a mutual, where someone had said, they took a picture of and here, I'm gonna throw up the screen share here. They took a picture of the Mark II, and they said that, in the history of Gundam, the mid-season upgrade that Camille got going from the Mark II to the Zeta was the biggest mistake in anime history. Um, and I understand the appeal because the Mark II is pretty fantastic. But my mutual tweeted out something to the effect of I wish I pulled up the tweet to show you guys, but He said something to the effect of, like, as far as Gundam designs go and, like, Gundam-y things, that Gundam design peaked with the Mark II because and we've said something to this to the, the same effect, right? Like, it is basically like the perfect version of the original Gundam design. It's just advanced enough without going too far off the rails. I guess especially if you were to look at the AU colors because, that would
Yeah,
be
that's my preferred. Yeah, this is again, this is the fully realized, real robot with the budget and the trust from the executives of like, okay, guys, make a sequel. And this is like, this is what we want it to look like. This is what I've always said that when I first got into Gundam, and I think I said even on my video I posted, uh, once I got to Zeta and saw the Mark II, I was like, that is the sickest design. Like to eh, everything we've said,
yeah.
it just
I
works.
I mean, it just perfectly epitomizes Gundamness,
Yeah, yeah,
um,
100%.
without deviating too far from the original design.
Yeah.
Um, this is, perfect. Oh, wait, there it goes, yeah. So Dan says, "I thought all of anime was a mistake, nothing but trash." And Pyro, of course, says he will die on this hill, and die you shall, sir. Um,
And he's
uh,
saying the double Zeta is a superior design, which I respect that opinion a
I
lot
was gonna say
because
that's something that, that you've pointed out as well.
yeah, and yeah, it's kind of like exactly what Kyle's saying. Kyle, I'm so glad you said that. He goes, I think the face is a make or break for a lot of people on Zeta. That's
It
why
is.
I think the double Zeta looks great because it's taking the classic face look. And so then I divide these Gundams and you see two ways. There's the Gundam face, and then there's like the angular, like futuristic, like prototype version, and they use
Yeah.
one or the other as they go. Yeah.
Yeah, like the GPO2,
Yep.
has, like, that
Yeah.
alternate face design.
Yeah. That's another good example.
It's true.
Using the angular looks. Yeah.
So with that said, I have to ask Adam, what would be your top 5 Gundam designs in all of Gundam?
And in all of Gundam, that's interesting
Not
because
just UC.
yeah, no, that's interesting because I feel like for each individual, it could be different what you're looking at to be a top design. So I feel like for today's specific, actually, I don't know. I was going to say for the purpose of today's question, I still don't know what my answer would be in terms of like, is it what am I looking for? Like, I guess just to get to the answer, Adam, get to it. It would be like the Mark II, the original Gundam, the Hazel, like a GM Cold Districts type, like that type of design, which is very grounded, militaristic. Yeah, Hazel is like one, and again, it's based off the Mark II. But like, then there's other suits from other series. Is there really? Because I don't even own. I got the stuff from Zionic Shadow, like with Seed and
Yeah.
Wing, but no, I really think it's yeah this stuff.
Yeah, all these Titans designs, right? Which
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just noticed that, let me go back to the Mark II page because there's a very inflammatory inflammatory quote that really should solidify to people that the Titans are the bad guys. So it says, "At last, the Gundam by us and for us has been rolled out. For we the Titans, who uphold the principles of Earth supremacy, this pure-blooded Gundam made by the Earth Federation forces is unpolluted by Spacenoid engineers. It's the form, of the mobile suit that should have been given to us from the start."
that's funny. I feel like that plays on breaking the fourth wall in a way, but
Yeah.
also the designers in universe, the way they would speak of something like that, and what the Gundam kind of represents anyway in that world. So
Um, but yeah, and, like, even just the phrasing here seems so, Ubermensch, like,
yeah,
Fourth Reich talk.
I know that's
It's
classic Titans. That's why I like them as bad guys. They were awesome bad guys.
they really are peak bad guys.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean,
But I mean,
I can
for you,
appreciate
Steven,
that.
like I, I feel like we have some crossover with our favorite suits. but I think there's a lot that are very different from each other. But for you, where do you stand with the Mark II?
The Mark II is definitely in my top 5.
Oh,
Um,
cool. Cool, cool.
yeah, I would say that my top 5 across kind of all series would be, like, Zeta, obviously. The Mark II would probably be number 2 because like I said, and we agree on this where it's like it is the Gundam realized. Um, and then the other ones are kinda oddballs because it's like I
I
like the
bet.
Gundam Epion.
Oh, that was one I was gonna say too. I wasn't too sure, but that
Yeah,
yeah.
the Epion is pretty sweet, and then, I love the Ultron,
Mm.
honestly, either version, the Endless Waltz version or the TV show version. Um,
Well,
excuse me.
do you
Geez,
think
these allergies
any
are kicking my
oh,
butt.
same here. But let me ask you, and I don't mean this in an inflammatory way, but do you think like recent new Gundam designs have really been anything exciting? Because I kind of don't think so, even though I think they've been interesting. Like even in Witch from Mercury, I think all those suits look interesting, but nothing stands out as wow, look at this new design. But even something like the Penelope, but that was designed long before, right? So it's
True.
almost like that's still using the older kind of design philosophies. And when we get to newer stuff, even Iron-Blooded Orphans, I know they have more of a unique look anyway, but still, when it comes to giant robots, there's none of those designs I even really care for. That's probably why I haven't even finished the show. I think.
Well, so I have a theory about that,
Okay.
and, I've talked about this before where, I particularly don't like over-rendered designs, and I think where a lot of that comes from is, you know, Kunio Okawara did not he was not a mechanical designer. He was just a graphic artist. He was a designer, right?
No, wasn't he a mechanical designer?
Well, now he is, right? Like, he's credited as a mechanical designer.
Oh, so he wasn't when they first hired him?
No, no, so that's he talked about
Oh.
this in that NHK documentary where it was like, I didn't design giant robots because I designed giant robots, like, they asked me to design a giant robot, and that's what I became, right?
But he was a designer first though of
Oh, yeah.
mechanical things.
Yeah,
That's where I got that idea. They hired a mechanical designer to design robots, to have the mechanical stuff in mind.
Yeah,
Right,
well, and
okay.
I think that that's where it's like, his designs came from a design principle kind
Yeah,
of thing where it's like, "Hey, I'm gonna observe the golden ratio. I'm gonna, like, make this look good as a design first." Whereas I think that now, because mecha shows and anime have become so popular, you have an entire generation of mechanical designers that have grown up as mechanical designers for mecha. And so everything becomes more derivative, everything becomes
yes.
like a reference to something else where it's like, "Oh, well, I'm gonna take the feet from this mecha that I like, and I'm gonna take the head style from this and, like, mash them together." And so
Yeah,
what you end up having is these mecha that are they're not sound designs based on, like, design principles that they would teach in, like, I don't know, graphic design school, but they are, like, just mechanical, like, things, and
yeah.
some people appreciate them because they're a little bit more realistic. It's like, Bayverse Transformers, right? It's like, "Oh, well, yeah,
Oh, I see what you mean.
that is what a Transformer would look like in real life." But it's like, the reason we liked Transformers is because they didn't look like something that you would see in real
Yeah.
life.
Dude, I completely agree with this theory, and I believe it's true too, and I think I've even done it on a personal level in my own creativeness where it's sometimes I'm missing the point of an original idea. Because yeah, if we get to like the Penelope and Kasai Gundam, those were actually originally created a long time ago, but we see
Yeah.
them in 2021 in that movie, and to me, it's like, whoa, those are neat designs, and it's because again, they were created back when the mecha I guess mecha robot anime stuff was it was still in a phase where people were coming up with neat things like Pat Labor has its own kind of look and style too.
Yeah.
And I really do think and that's something and I sometimes maybe don't know how to interpret it when I'm saying it in a video, but like I'll look at like a Witch for Mercury Gundam and like it's like I can see that this is supposed to be like a a mechanical like grounded, but it's missing the things that would sort of inform the functionality of like a shoulder or inform the
Yeah.
functionality. Like if there's not informed functionality, it's really just kind of you were saying like a Bay verse Transformers thing where it's just doodads to be like, oh look, that looks like a wire, so this is mechanical. You know,
Right, yeah, and I mean, there's nothing for your eyes to rest on. It's just, like, a lot of panel lines, a lot of, like, moving parts and things like that, which again, it's realistic, I guess, but,
yeah,
this is interesting because this relates to a conversation that we were having over on my Discord server about, non-standard races in D&D. And I think a lot of, like you said, when it came to older anime, they were working within the limitations of, "Okay, we're gonna have to draw this thing, like, 7,000 times per season. So let's not put in too many moving parts and doodads and things like that because, like, I just wanna be able to draw it, next sheet, draw it, next sheet."
yeah.
So if you've got a team of animators working on these things, then you do try to dumb down the designs. That's where you get like Gigantor, which is just like a series of cylinders, right? But now with all the modern animation techniques with CGI, you can design the most fantastic thing ever, and then it's just rinse and repeat, right?
Yeah, and scale and perspective is preserved because it's kinda done with computers in a way sometimes to kinda
Hmm.
help make that and,
You can
it
trace.
reminds me of when I'm watching the old X-Men animated show, like, as much as I've always liked it and think it looks good, it also looks janky to me, but I recognize that as that's a lot of detail that they're trying to like, it's a lot of like, American comic books had so much detail, it's like, how could you animate that? Yet
Exactly.
and maybe Japanese artists kind of, realized that early on, and they kinda changed their in manga, not all of them, but the artwork, especially that got translated to cartoons or animation, had more streamlined features. Sometimes when we are or I'm making fun of the faces and Seed, I think it's because of wanting to streamline the animation process in the past, it led to these look like things that then in the future you have an artist like, well, I'm going to double down on the giant eyes and the small chin. But they were just unknowingly refining a process made because of technological limitations or something.
That's so funny. And yeah, I mean, I think that there is that's that I would credit that as a positive theory because like and it goes back to what we were saying where it's like, because today's generation of mecha designers grew up on mecha, like, they all of the things that they do are derivative and informed by the things that came before them. So,
Yeah.
like you said, they lean harder into those anime tropes that might have been as a result of trying to save money.
Yeah. And that's another reason why I like the Mark II.
Yeah.
What else looks like that or even looked like that up to that point? I wasn't even around then, but even today, like, I appreciate that, wow, they came up with that design back then, that is amazing.
That is an iconic look for sure.
Yeah,
But yeah, and so I would say, and this is the point that I was trying to make on Discord about tabletop RPGs, is that creativity thrives with limitations.
yeah.
If everything is possible, if everything is special, then nothing is special, and you really can't, you know, if you let a character in D&D, for instance, be whatever they want to be, like, oh, you can be a dragon. Well, then, what's even the point? Because then what are you going to do when the big bad evil guy is a dragon? Like, well, I'm already a dragon,
Yeah.
So yeah, I think
Oh,
that yeah, keeping it simple for sure is definitely part of it. There were some great comments in here that I wanted to bring up because Um, oh, so Kyle says Moon Gundam is the most unique new Gundam. I agree with that. I mean, I think that but it still is in that UC like style. It's not too far removed from it the way that like IBO and Witch from Mercury are, I would
yeah,
say.
that's a very good example of new Gundam designs that are done real well, and that started with manga designs, which kinda goes to my comic book theory of, like, when you're drawing it just not for animating, but for static looks, you can really go all in, and the Moon Gundam obviously is an amazing look.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Ultronymous here says that it's safe to say that modern mecha designers have not learned the lesson that less is more. To which Pyro says that the only appropriate look for a mecha is continental level chunk, which I kind of agree with. I love a good chunky mech.
Yeah,
Um,
it helps.
that should be the metric by which we by which we determine what is the best Gundam design.
Wow.
Um, and then, of course, Pyro says he stands by the core Gundam as one of the best Gundam designs because it's a tribute design that has a whole bunch of variations that make it look more original.
Yeah, that is a cool idea. By the way, don't mean to bring this up, but where are you with that Core Zeta thing?
You're gonna throw me under the bus like that? I'm actually I've gotten a little further with it. The legs are
Oh, that's
done,
cool.
portion of it. The torso is the part that I'm having the biggest, trouble with because I've basically had to, like at this point, I'm, like, basically rebuilding the torso from scratch because the way that the Zeta Gundam's chest works, because it has that transformation gimmick to it, like
It's not a chest. It's just random panels that kind of fit into each other.
exactly. So it's like, you know, eh, I guess the best way to describe it is it's almost like the core Gundam is wearing the Zeta Gundam like a tank top.
Uh, that makes sense. I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I guess it's going to work, but we'll see. I like I said, I do want to since I couldn't preserve the transformation gimmick of the Zeta, I do like that it's going to have like a back weapon system where the Zeta parts can disconnect from the core Gundam and connect to the Wave Rider mode, which
Yeah.
is what you and I have been saying. Like,
They need to just do because we have that SD one, I think we both have the SD Zeta that's actually really cool how it works, even though it's SD,
yeah,
but it
exactly.
yeah.
So yeah, I guess that kind of covers our answers for
Yeah.
what are the top 5 Gundam designs. I think you and I both land on the idea that the Mark II really is
Yeah,
it's like the definitive Gundam design.
I think it is. It definitely is, and I think it's even worth maybe discussing sometime. Maybe that's a video or another show. Maybe even tomorrow's Gundam Explain show. But
Hey,
like
there you go.
of what are some interesting favorite or unique Gundam designs that are not tied down to our personal biases? It's like because the Epion was a good example of I think the Epion looks sick, but I don't care about that in a Gundam anime. But on its own, like, the one Zeonic Shadow got me that I built, like, that is just a badass action figure to me. Like, it's just
Yeah.
badass.
And it has the most unique beam sword, of any any Gundam design. I don't think that any other Gundam has that type of weapon, and I am a
Yeah.
sucker for those types of unique styled weapons where it's like, that's one of the reasons I love the Shenlong and the Ultron is that, like,
Oh, their
it's one of
weapons
the
are
only Gundams that uses, like, a pole arm. I think that
yeah.
was what drew me to the Dilanza from Witch from Mercury.
Okay, so you're a fan of unique armaments,
Yeah,
whereas
things that'll make them stand out a little bit.
okay, because I think I've distilled mine down to backpacks. So, for me, the
Ah,
Mark II backpack is the coolest backpack just because it has all the thrusters and the general shape, and it has what are some minor binders perhaps but it also has
yeah.
the beam sabers in there, so yeah,
And that makes a lot more sense the way that the beam saber, um, the saber racks fit
would
on
work.
there as
Yeah.
opposed to, like, just a plug the way that the original Gundam was.
Yeah, again, another top tier design element to add in, yeah, that's interesting. So a lot of times when you come across like a new mobile suit design or something, you're kind of taking into account, okay, what is it armed with and how does it look? And do you like symmetry or asymmetry?
Well, it's funny because I used to be very big about symmetry, and it's one of the reasons I loved, like, the Gap plant because,
Oh
the
yeah,
Gap plant is so
completely.
perfectly
Yeah.
symmetrical. It's got the cannons on both arms, dual beam sabers, like, everything about it is perfectly down the middle, but I've come to appreciate asymmetry when it's done really well.
Yeah,
What
like
about you?
functional wise, like the ground Gundam. Yeah, I think I like I think it really depends. I like asymmetry if it's because like if it's function based. Like,
Yeah.
like with what was it? Some recent asymmetry I like is the what is it called? The Witch from Mercury, the last suit, the aerial. I don't even think the rebuild, the one after that, the Calibarn,
Oh,
where
yeah,
how
yeah.
it looks with its little witch broom gun, like it, and it creates this sort of offset asymmetrical thing. Like if you were to have it, I do like that. Yeah, especially when there's, like, a lot of wing binders or something, or with the moon, how sometimes the moon Gundam, depending on how it has the panels.
Yeah, the moon I like the crescent-shaped panel orientation more than the Psycho Gundam Mark IV where it's just, like, wings, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, because it makes it look like it's serving a purpose, and it's like, "Ooh, what is that purpose? I don't know."
Exactly.
Yeah.
See, and the asymmetry is what kind of turned me off from the new Gundam, but I still like the
Yeah.
asymmetry of, like, the Zaku's because to me, that is informed by their function, right? Like, they
Yes,
have a spiked
exactly.
shoulder because that's the shoulder that they,
Yep.
attack with, but then they have a shielded one for,
That's a good example of where asymmetry works. It's like it's that this informed functionality, you know?
Yeah. And I think that that goes back to, like, what kind of makes a good design, and I think, obviously, all of us have different, things that we look for when it comes to what makes an attractive design, um, so, yeah, I think, like, function for me is a big one, and then just generally, like, I hate to say just, like, good design principles, but it's like, I need something you need a place for your eyes to rest, for something that draws your attention. I think so you didn't by chance see that, portrait of the king that was just unveiled in England, did you?
No, I heard about it though, but I hadn't seen it.
So, what's interesting about it is, like, it's almost all red, like, he's wearing red, it's a red background, but, like, the only things that really stand out are the face, and everyone's, like, making all these, crazy theories about, like, "Oh, well, it's supposed to symbolize this, this, and this," and I was like,
Mm,
I mean, to me, as a designer, when I look at it, because his face is the only thing that's not just painted red, it makes it so that his face stands out, and that's what your eyes are drawn to. And I think similarly, when you have like the Granddaddy Gundam and it's got, this blue chest with like a pop of yellow.
yeah,
Like I think that's one of the reasons that those primary colors work so well is that they stand out so well against each
against
other
each
that
other. Yeah.
you can
Yeah, that's why the AU Mark II looks better.
yeah, there you go. Well, and I think it's why we love those Titans colors, right? Like cuz they're generally kind of dark purple, but then you
Yeah,
have like the pops of yellow on them that
right.
really
Yeah. Yeah, no, that is cool.
so yeah. But so you look for a good looking backpack.
Yeah,
Watch out, everybody. Adam's checking out your backside.
wouldn't be the first time, but no. Yeah, sometimes if a backpack design is it's like, "Eh," or sometimes like, even on this, sniper, I think it's just okay.
Yeah, they
I don't
definitely
know.
went for simplicity on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Sweet. Well, that kind of wraps up our discussion for today. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, I knew you guys were gonna enjoy Adam and I arguing about what makes a good Gundam design. But
Oh, yeah, that's always
hopefully,
fun.
like I said, your uh, horizons have been broadened on the topic of AI, both in person and in video games.
Yep.
Yeah, like I said, if you haven't, go check out Adam's video from this morning
Oh, yeah.
about the robot spirits Mark II,
Yeah.
and go check out that G Watch where
Oh,
Ian
yeah.
and Ashley break down their reviews of the Seed Freedom movie.
Yeah.
For
Those are fun.
me, I appreciated it because since I didn't get to watch it, I'm like, oh, I get to hear like some Seed
What's
experts
yeah.
talk about talk
Yeah,
about
because it's one of
Seed.
those things, like, I wouldn't even know what to talk about, like, how invested am I in this? But there's a lot of interesting little story tidbits to speak on, so,
Yeah, they brought some great
yeah.
insight to the table, so that was a great show.
No, thank you.
Good deal. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in, keeping the chat lively. We will see you tomorrow for the Gundam Explained show.
Yep. See y'all.
All right, cheers, everybody.